what's big and purple and mad all over, and always gets his way? Why, Thanos, and he wins on this episode of Panelism. Welcome to Panelism, the show where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I am Taylor Trask.
And I'm Todd A.
And Todd, it is another beautiful week out there in comic book land.
What was the there was some dumb theme that I kept harping on. I can't remember if it was weather or anyway. It's funny because we have consistently been recording podcasts and even Panelism, but we haven't talked about comic books in a while.
No, because we got off on a movie tangent, and then we
did a Game of Thrones preview.
Oh
yeah, and a movie preview, and then a Shazam episode. And,
yeah. So it has been a hot second since we've been talking about a book, so we're back to it, and I'm just going to jump right in. I've got a pick this week that is something I heard about while it was going on. I think I read an IO9 article or something about it and thought, well, that's kind of a cool notion, and was just randomly perusing Comixology. I'm still one of the unlimited member for a little while longer.
Yeah, me
and
too.
I just went to, and it's popped up. I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna with Avengers Endgame coming out. I definitely wanted to just sort of have a Thanos fix, and I decided to download and read Thanos Wins by Donny Cates, who we'll get back to in a second. He's kind of the main showrunner for this thing, but then joining him as writers are Kieran Gillen, Al Ewing, Ryan North, Christopher Hastings, and Katie Cook. And then Jeff Shaw did a lot of the art along with Donnie, and then Fraser Irving, also an artist on the series. So quite a lot of people pitching in, but Donny Cates, you may know from a little book called God Country, which came out on Image recently, that I'm going to be talking about very soon. So we'll come back to that in a future episode. Really great book, indie limited series on Image.
And of course, you'll know Katie Cook from My Little Pony. You and I are huge bronies, so.
That's right. For the record, we are not. Well, this may be Todd's coming out party. I don't know. I'm going to confess here and now. I'm a brony. You just gotta have to rip the bandage off. If you're gonna do it, just do it, in style and flair. Anyway, Thanos Wins. Obviously published by Marvel. I read it via my iPad, Comixology Unlimited, which I'm just going to say out of the gate, I think is the proper way to consume this. If you feel like not wanting to rent it, just buy the digital copy if you want to actually own it. But I think cover flow or guided view through Comixology or whatever your app is probably the best way to do this. You kind of need that cinematic look at it. Guided view, you're only looking at it one panel at a time. I should always remember we have listeners who probably aren't familiar with guided view. Maybe remind them, if you're on Comixology, or there's a couple, I think when Image sold their own stuff, their digital files, they had a version of this you could get, I think. But you're basically, it zooms in on a particular panel, and there's a really fluid animation that occurs as you go from panel to panel. Sometimes the screen color will change from black to white, and it'll sort of try to accent the right stuff at the right time, and you read it in that flow. So it feels like a storyboard, like an actual movie storyboard or an animatic or something like that. So for this book, very much probably the best way to consume it, because you find out pretty quick there's a lot of twists, and a lot of those twists occur on the same page. So you'll flip the page and you'll get a glimpse of something. You're like, oh, Jesus. Whereas if you just see it one panel at a time, you're not spoiled that far into the book. So some of these twists can be a lot more surprising or a lot more pronounced.
Now, one thing we always bring up is like, were there times where you tapped out to see the whole page? Was there a composition for, between all the panels that you felt you're missing out on, or that was easy to access or whatever?
I did it so for example, when they have, and usually cover or guided view will just do this for you anyway. If it feels like the whole page is one big thing you need to see, it will finish your scroll by zooming out itself. But like if you see a panel where there's like interconnected lines to what's clearly the next panel and the next panel, where you're like, oh, I need to see what this looks like as a whole because there's an obvious design choice, then yeah, I'll zoom out. But if it's clearly part of the the panel, the actual grid system in a very clear way, I usually don't.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So anyway, this definitely, and I'm sure you can enjoy it printed too. I'm not saying you can't, but it's just for me it worked really, really well through guided view. And I'm just gonna come out of the gate and say, this is like the theme or sort of the aesthetic of this book is like a monster truck rally and like a Metallica concert or something, kind of all rolled into one. It's extreme on every level. You almost feel like if this was a movie, Thor Ragnarok had some pretty jamming songs, but this would just have death metal playing as its soundtrack, as every scene happens.
This is Twisted Sister's Christmas album, is what you're saying.
Sure, yeah. Unfamiliar, but yes. And it has all the same bombacity. If you liked God Country, which Donny Cates wrote, created, drew, if you like that book, it's got a kind of a male soap opera kind of vibe. It's just big and grandiose. You might say Shakespearean, but I would even say it. God Country feels almost sort of timeless. It's a timeless myth. Thanos Wins the same, very much the same. Like you kind of feel like you're reading, like something similar to like the Epic of Gilgamesh or Beowulf. It's sort of written, or even like the Book of Revelations. It just has this very sort of grand, sort of very non-nuanced, extreme storytelling style. It's just like nothing's left to stand.
Totally, yeah.
Anyway, here's the back of the book. Ask the most powerful beings how the universe will end, and they will answer with these two words: Thanos wins. And now it looks as though that disturbing thought is about to become a horrific reality. See what happens when the Mad Titan gets his way. Thanos journeys to the end of time, and at his moment of complete victory, he still isn't happy with what he sees. Witness the Mad Titan's greatest glory and ultimate shame. And no matter what form Thanos' victory takes, is there any way that anyone or anything can possibly survive? Featuring the Silver Surfer and introducing the all-new Cosmic Spirit of Vengeance Ghost Rider. TM.
Mm-hmm.
So
now that you've read that, I'm sorry, maybe now that you've read that, is this book in canon?
Now that I've experienced that, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now I read it not knowing most of the canon. Strangely, I actually did coincidentally read right before this the Infinity Wars run, the newer one from like two or 3 years ago, where the Requiem character does something to Thanos that I don't want to spoil. But so I read that, and that occurs pretty much right before this, or right after this, one of the two. I think right before this. So
I do like how the event books, when they've already done it and they want a sequel to it, DC and Marvel just pluralize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Infinite Crises, Infinity Wars.
Yeah. There's more wars now. No, it was a good little series. I rented that one too, just because it's not one of those books that I would ever want to own. Because you read it once and you're kind of like, okay, that's fine. It's not going to reveal some new truth every time you open it up necessarily. I mean, not maybe to some, I don't know. I shouldn't say that. Anywho, so that's the back of the book. It's very, very arch, very overdramatic. To kind of summarize that though, Thanos, the underlying plot line, without spoiling too much, I'll try to keep it base level. So some of these things are obvious. There's a few interesting twists that I'm not going to spoil too much, but basically Thanos goes, recruits his younger self millions of years in the past to help him in present day. So Thanos is basically the only living thing at the end of the universe. But he's got to fight this character called the Fallen One, this mysterious character. So he recruits younger Thanos to come forward to do that. Along the way, he's basically recruited by this sort of cosmic character / Ghost Rider, who is actually Frank Castle. So at some point in the book, they explain how Frank Castle became first the Punisher, obviously, but then also the Ghost Rider, and then basically becomes a ward of Galactus or a herald of Galactus. And so he becomes like power cosmic Ghost Rider Frank Castle, and then
Oh my God.
lives for like millions and millions of years and goes crazy and just becomes this kind of goofy Deadpool-like character at the end of time with Thanos. It's a little convoluted, but
wait, is the book kind of goofy? I mean, you definitely set it up like it's over the top, but if it's in canon, I mean,
it's in canon, but it's just like you'll see here in just a second.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, so that's the his cosmic Ghost Rider character. They do have a wonderful kind of, like I said, chapter of it where they really focus on what happened to him. And every time they flash back, they just show, it's the end of the Avengers. So like Thanos just is immortal. He just goes on and on and on. And, at some point he's able to kill them all. And then at some point he's able to enslave Earth, and then Earth dies off. So all these things happen. Just to give you a sense of the grandiose part of it, he sits his castle. He comes back to like a totally, overrun. No one lives, no population, no vegetation, no animals, like Earth, just a barren wasteland. He fights the Eternals. He beats all the Eternals, and he builds like this giant black tower spire out of their bones.
Okay,
and
that's
it's like
cool.
Yeah, so there's like it's all this like very, very metal, kind of imagery, but it focuses on this little slice of Frank Castle, how he becomes Ghost Rider, and he basically at the end of the universe, Galactus is one of the last things living too. And there's this beautiful panel that I'll try to post in the Instagram post for this episode, where it's Frank Castle talking to an injured Galactus, and they're just sort of sitting on this rooftop, and it's just this weird, surreal scene. Ghost Rider and Galactus, and him trying to make a deal.
Hold on. Did you say sitting on a rooftop?
Ghost Rider is, and Galactus is like.
I'm just picturing like they're both sitting.
Holding hands.
Rooftop.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Well, like Galactus's feet are just on the ground, but he's just sitting on a skyscraper or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a giant Galactus. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's there. He brings present day Thanos forward in time. So then you meet King Thanos, who's this immortal character. He's all old. He's got a white beard and everything. And the only other creatures alive are him, the Fallen One, who we'll meet eventually, Cosmic Ghost Rider, and then we learn that he's had the Hulk as his pet this entire time. And you meet Bruce Banner at some point too. But both of them, both the Hulk and Banner, every time they meet a new person, they're just like, kill me. Please kill me.
So
he's been alive that whole time.
Which Hulk is it? Is it Bruce?
It's Bruce, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, somehow they find a way, or I'm sure maybe in some offshoot book they explain how Thanos was able to keep him alive, or maybe it's just a random aside. Who knows? Some of this book works really well. Just you can enjoy it and not know the canon. I'm sure knowing the canon would make it.
It's already messing me up because I'm trying to like rewind and go like, okay, well, this book came out last year.
Yeah.
Was Bruce Banner alive then?
I don't know. I mean, he's alive in the future, so maybe they bring him back now. He lives in this. And it looks, when they show it from the outside, it looks just like the Black Tower from the Black Tower. It's just like that spire-looking shape you see on the cover of those Stephen King books and comics. It's just very similar, very, very eerie in that way. Quick shout out to the art. Lengthy shout out to the art, not quick. It's amazing. It's cinematic, beautifully colored. So one of the other things you get with guided view is these panels up close or highlighted or singled out. You get to really kind of take in the color a lot more than you would when it's on a bigger page. And the splash pages themselves are obviously really well done too. But yeah, just really, really good color, really good shading. And again, the art's just has that really interesting cinematic touch, which is you get more to when you guided view.
You had mentioned all the artists that contributed to that, and I know some of those names were also writers, but is it like different artists come in for different issues, or are they using them for different scenes?
There's only one art. I mean, I think the only two artists are Donny Cates and Jeff Shaw.
Oh, and all those other names were just writers?
And Fraser Irving, yeah. So Kieran Gillen, author, Al Ewing, author, Ryan North, Christopher Hastings, Katie Cook, all authors. Oh no, Katie Cook was an author artist. I apologize. So she drew some of it too.
Gotcha.
So yeah, the art changes here and there, but it seems largely consistent. There's like a sort of thing on the extra issue or two on the back end that are just purely like Batmite sort of just random non sequitur kind of things. And so like at one point Thanos is like a small like Pokemon children's toy, and he's like ordering these other cute animals around. You're just like, what is going on? Okay. So I'm guessing some of these artists or some of these author creators might have contributed to that.
Gotcha.
A little tricky after that original list. It was tricky to kind of keep track of who did what.
Right.
So just go to Comixology or Amazon to kind of sort through that. But cinematic and the guided view really, really works well. They started incorporating the movie designs of characters into the comic continuity more and more. So right out of the gate, you notice you're seeing Thanos' face looks a lot more like Josh Brolin's face. He's got, and they're showing it a lot more. They're showing his eyes more. His expressions are much more like Josh Brolin expressions, and they're even giving him, like the King Thanos, old Thanos in the future's battle armor. The helmet looks exactly like what Brolin's Thanos wears. It's exactly the same design. So I've seen that with a couple other recent Marvel issues. Of things.
Me too.
Star-Lord's looking more like Chris Pratt.
Loki is straight up Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah. So it's interesting they're doing that. I'm sure it helps with sales to some degree. But you inevitably start hearing those actors' voices in your head instead of your own version of Thanos. So that was kind of cool because you got to hear like, ooh, what would this sound like if Josh Brolin said it? But there's kind of hearing your original idea of his voice in your mind too. You don't want to lose that necessarily, but
right.
I don't know. Hewing so closely to the movies, it almost makes it inevitable. You're just gonna kind of treat this all as the same thing. Yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up because I have real mixed feelings about that. Like I had that when I encountered that Loki version in Thor of like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Well,
real quick, one of the other things, and this is sort of spoilery, but it's not, it's gonna happen. It's not like it's a secret, and I feel like knowing it does enhance your appreciation of the book if you knew it was coming, but. Like Thanos is always trying to appeal to death, and the personification of death, and he's always trying to court her. And in Infinity Gauntlet, tries, takes control of all of existence, all of reality, and she still, spurns him. In this, he finally does something to get her attention, and she comes to him. So it's kind of cool to see that. What he does is a huge spoiler, so I don't want to say that, give that away or the resolution of that. But what's really freaking weird is that when she appears, you see her kind of, a little in the distance as traditionally depicted. But as she comes closer and closer and the shot gets tighter and tighter, she looks and acts like a Japanese Harajuku girl. Like she's got this weird sort of anime hair, and she makes these weird sort of winking kind of like expressions, and she doesn't say any words, but she does these kind of like little winky anime sort of Sailor Moon kind of faces, and I'm just like, what is this? It's very bizarre. It does kind of work given how ridiculous everything else is that you're seeing, sort of this like this end time scenario. They eventually reveal who the fallen one is too. I don't necessarily want to spoil that. It's kind of a cool little twist if you don't know it's coming. But that sort of ties it all together. So there's essentially four or five characters at the end of all time and death. And she's like a Harajuku girl. And you're just like, okay, I guess that is happening too now. So, but it did throw me off at first.
Interesting. So, I mean, a lot of things you've said are like described it as over the top or something. Do you feel like it almost could have gone more over the top? Could we have gone into that Rob Liefeld, like Deadpool ridiculousness? Where
it's kind of there already. That's what I'm saying. That's sort of the level that we're at. I don't think it's to say it's self-aware, maybe the wrong read, but it's not afraid to just make big, giant, bold strokes or take like a, neon pink can of spray paint and just go, just spray over everything.
Yeah. I know I'm projecting my own wishes for this book onto it, because when you texted me and told me what book you were doing, my reply was like, I so hope that's Scotty Young doing like a piss take on it all, cause I really wanted that like over the top kind of thing of, something just so beyond and so metal that it couldn't be in canon.
Well, now that you say the Rob Liefeld thing, the whole issue where um, uh, Castle becomes the Ghost Rider slash like that whole issue. I mean, I'm looking at it. Rob Liefeld might as well have actually drawn it out. Like, it's so extreme. There's one portion where it shows like Thanos. It's like the final fight with the Avengers, and he's just straight up murdering everybody. He's like ripping Peter Parker, and he literally takes Iron Man. There's a panel where he's ripping him in half, and just blood and guts are spilling everywhere. It's like Thanos is like, oh, and it's like just this, again, in the Thor Ragnarok version of this, that would be happening in slow motion while you heard this like, you're just like behind it. It just, you almost imagine that the Zack Snyder 300 effect, where just all the just gruesome shit happens in slow motion. It's kind of what a lot of this book is. Just really, extreme, violent sort of. Oh wow, okay.
I mean, I definitely appreciate that it was released in the off season between Infinity War and Endgame. Like that's a pretty cool idea. And apparently just goes off on a tangent. And they're not trying to make it a book that's like, keeping your interest peaked. They're trying to show you a alternative outcome or a different story with those characters, which that's very intriguing because it's not like a supplement. Or maybe it is a supplement, but it's not.
I'm glad you said that, because the way it ends,
could
easily make it an Elseworlds book.
Yeah.
What's the Marvel? Do they use that term, or is that a DC term?
I can't remember which is which, but one of them is What If.
What If is Marvel, so like that would make it a What If book. But you could also make a solid case that it is that, and it is also in continuity.
Well, I mean, that's the nice thing about the Time Stone, right?
That does
it's all what if.
Well, the Time Stone you find out early on, the Time Stone is how they're able to take current Thanos into the future. That is what is used. But that is the Infinity Stones after that don't really play any role, I don't think. Yeah, no, they don't. So there is something that the way it ends, the title is true. Thanos wins. He just wins everything, but it's, it does leave it open to interpretation.
Well, did you enjoy it?
I did. I didn't have to read it at any point, and I clipped through it pretty quick. Like, I think while I was waiting on my oil change, and then maybe a little after that, some hour and a half, read the way I like to read, the speed I like to read at. So that it went pretty quick. It was just a nice, fun little book, and you get more context into Thanos that isn't the Infinity Gauntlet, just utter, you don't get Thanos running around in like a helicopter with his name on it. Like in some of those books, I still don't know how or why that would happen, but I don't want it. I don't want somebody who has wielded cosmic power and is this immense threat to be riding around in a helicopter with his own name on it.
That intrigues me now.
Are you not familiar with this? You know what I'm talking about? No. Google Thanos helicopter and just see what you see.
Oh no.
This is a real thing. This happened a lot too. This was a common thing.
Like a common thing in the comic books?
And in the cartoon. There was like a cartoon that had it like a Spider-Man or something where Thanos appears as like a side character.
Well, I definitely like the toy of the Thanos copter.
I mean,
what the fuck? This is so weird.
Is he the Penguin? Like, what the hell? Like, what does he have?
Yeah.
So it's not that, because that's the whole reason I brought that up. This is not that. This is definitely its own thing, and it's just it's sort of batshit crazy enough where you're just like, all right, I'm not. I don't need to own it physically. It's it is considerably close to a 80s slasher movie that you'd rent on VHS in 1988. Like, we're gonna watch Halloween 2, everybody. Just like, you get it, you rent it. You don't have to own it, but once in a while, you just want to grab it from the store, give it a spin. So if you're a big Thanos fan, own it. If you're a big Marvel Avengers fan, own it probably. But if you're a casual comics fan,
we kind of talked about this a little bit before we started recording. We were joking about how Comixology makes it easy to have to read the comics that are worth having on your digital shelf for a little while, or however we qualify it.
The comics worth having on your digital shelf for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, because honestly, once you started talking about it, I went straight to Comixology and downloaded it. When you and I texted about it before recording this, I didn't know how you'd read it, so I didn't even look for it, honestly. But yeah, it's like you describing it. I just punch that little borrow button and I'll check this out. It definitely, I do like the feeling of having a digital book and giving up in the middle. It's so much harder for me to do that with comics, especially. Well, I don't know, but maybe single issues makes it easier. But still, like if it's physical, I feel like, oh, I invested in this. I got to go through it.
I've actually, a strange story or tangent. There is one book that I have actually bought twice as a trade paperback and returned twice because I grabbed it. It's a Jonathan Hickman book. I'll just say what it is. It's Red Mask from Mars. And I've acquired it twice. I bought it once because I was like, oh, I'm a Hickman fan. I was just going down the list.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. Yeah.
And that's early Hickman too. So I was like, oh, hell yeah. And it just, oh man, it falls flat. It's just like, what is this? This is not what I'm used to. And so I was like, well, with a heavy heart, I will donate it to the library.
Yeah.
And then about a year ago, I was like, maybe I wasn't nuanced enough. Maybe it's like a Bowie album that you got to listen to 100 times to really get. I'm going to give it another chance. So I grabbed it again. And I'm like, if I change my mind, I don't want to have to buy it digitally and then physically because I'd rather have all the Hickman stuff physical. So I'm like, I'll just get it physically. I'll just get it physically because I'm like, if I don't want to have to own it twice for that reason. So I'll get it physically. Then that way I'll just have it and it'll be fine. And second time through, I did notice a few things I didn't notice before. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. But it was a big clunker. And I'm just like, man. All right. So donated that one too.
Yeah.
I can't do it a third time. I've signed that up. I have a list of never evers, and that's on that list now.
Yeah, it's funny too because I tell myself often that Comixology should be sort of the testing ground for that stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like just a lot of times they'll have single issues. Like the first couple are in the Unlimited, even if the trade paperbacks aren't, or I guess they're not trade paperbacks, but the collected editions. Yeah. And but there's some part of my completist impulse clicks in and I'm like, I don't want a single issue. I literally just did this last night. I realized I downloaded a single issue to check out a book and I was like, single issue. And I went back and looked for the collected edition and then realized, oh, right. That's why I only got the single issue.
Yeah.
But
I do that same thing where you're like, why do I have this? Oh, that's right.
I mean, it quickly gets out of hand with the Unlimited plan. But do you, what are the recommended if you like kind of books for this?
Ooh, God dang it. I didn't think about that.
Well, like the one that jumped to mind was the one you mentioned, the Galactus story that you mentioned from, I can't remember what it was.
Yes. It was, it's an Instagram post. It was the Ultimates #2.
Yes.
Which is the origin story of Galactus. That's a good point. If you like that, that's a little crazy. This is like that, but from the comics perspective, that's a good one. I would also, I mentioned him in the beginning, but the Beowulf, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, okay.
If you like classic myth, in the operatic style, this is for you. If you've ever sort of pondered the Book of Revelations, this is for you. If you as a child or as a teenager had a Megadeth and or Black Sabbath poster on your wall, this is for you. I'm just gonna keep thinking of possible, like, you might be a redneck style jokes about this book.
But again, maybe the Twisted Sister Christmas album. I'll read this, dear listeners, and then because I am a fan of the Twisted Sister Christmas album, so then I will be able to give you a more complete portrait. Is this an Amon Amarth album or is this Twisted Sisters Christmas album? I was gonna say, so would you recommend this above Infinity Gauntlet itself, the book?
Yes, God, yes.
Okay. So we talked about Infinity Gauntlet on number 68 of this podcast, and we were both not fans of that.
To say the least.
Yeah, accurate. And you talked about the Ultimates #2 in episode number 83. I wanted to look those two things up to point listeners, to other episodes where we've talked about
Yeah,
books like
if you want to see how Galactus got started, like what made Galactus, that is the issue to read and then listen to my spiel about it, because that's why I bought that thing. And I recently posted that cover on Instagram, and is by far our most popular post.
That's amazing. Well, that cover is so cool. The Da Vinci's like Vitruvian Man, but it's Galactus, right?
Yeah, that's the book. So just look for that symbol and read it. It's a hell of a fun read. You're like, wow, this is how Galactus got started. And then at the end of the story, because it's juxtaposed, his origins juxtaposed with a modern day ultimate plan that they're trying to take down Galactus. And so while they're doing that, they're telling a story at the same time. At the very end of it, something happens to Galactus that's pretty profound and interesting. So it's worth it just to kind of see what he becomes.
This is definitely an interesting vein to mine for us. Are those like, gigantic, epic Marvel stories? We don't usually get into that, especially not with our indie comics. So
yeah, it's a big jump.
Yeah, and I mean, even though like East of West is a huge Armageddon sort of scenario, it still doesn't feel like there's not a literally like a being that's as big as a planet and wants to eat it, that kind of thing. I don't know how to describe it. It's not that one's more ridiculous than the other. They're just still a different scale,
Yeah, and there's all this other interconnective tissue that in the Marvel universe or the DC universe or whatever their origins are.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've already borrowed this on Comixology, so I look forward to digging into it and playing some metal while I read it.
That's right. Well, if you want more books like this or other books from our past episodes, other episodes of this, go back, listen to the back catalog of Panelism. We started off as the Todd and Taylor show and have had a lot of twists and turns along the way, but have been talking comics pretty much through the entire thing. So go back. I
mean, we started talking about the Avengers, and here we are talking about the Avengers in episode
exactly. Wow.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Man, I didn't even think about that. What a wonderful.
I know we pride ourselves on our indie comic depth, but yeah, we always come back to the Avengers, of course.
And go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to, I know what you were going to do. I was going to say on next week's show, we're pretty sure we're going to be talking about Avengers Endgame.
Yes.
And then we'll be back to comics the week after that.
Heck yeah. And then comics pretty much from here on out.
What's the best place to find us online?
You'll find all of that information at panelism.inc, panelism.ink. That's the website address. And coincidentally, our Instagram handle also at panelism.inc.
Yeah.
That's where we post most of our stuff. All our picks, also just cool stuff that, from comics that are interesting or neat. Little this and that also, but just, find that. Follow our website. Also, look for a show called Wednesday in Westeros.
Oh, yes.
We are still running that for the next couple weeks and then thereafter here and there. But it is our Game of Thrones weekly recap. It comes out on Mondays. Don't let the name deceive you. Search for Wednesday in Westeros and subscribe and let us know your comments about that and all of the above.
Excellent. I will see you next time, or I will see you later.
Thanos wins. That's the new theme song right there.
Okay. On your mark.
Yeah.
Whenever.
Welcome to
Just go right ahead. Oh, sorry.